You want to move your grandfather clock, and you want to do that correctly. I'm Logan with Losine Clockworks, and I'm going to show you how to do that. And I'm going to show you a few high-level pointers and then a couple specifics on how I like to do it. Now, every clock's a little different, so I'd recommend getting a professional to make sure that everything is good to go. And also, I'd recommend that because whenever I move a grandfather clock, I always service the inside as well to make sure that I know that everything in here is good and I'm not going to have issues later on. But if you want to do it yourself, let me show you some things to watch out for and some things to make sure you do. High-level idea is that we need to get the weights off and pack them up, get the pendulum off and pack it up so it doesn't get bent, and then we need to pack up the case and make sure everything inside is safe and not going to rattle around. So first step is to get these weights packed up, but sometimes if you just take a weight off, on some of the older clocks, the cable can get all spooled up inside and it's a bad day. So to avoid that and to make sure that these pulleys are nice and safe, you can get a piece of paper towel or cardboard or something like that and stuff it inside of here. And then grab your crank and crank that weight up to the top. Doesn't have to be too tight, but just enough so that that pulley is stable. And then you take the weight off safely. You want to pack this up. Now, to pack up the weights, if you have the original box, that's super helpful. Usually it's got a foam divot that the weight goes in, keep it stable. If you got a cardboard box the right size, you can bundle it up, put it in there with some towels or something like that. If you don't have those, you can take a moving blanket and wrap the first one up in it, and then put the next one in and bundle that up, and put the next one in and keep bundling it. So you got a big old bundle of moving blanket and weights. They're pretty heavy. You know, a bundle of weights might be 20 pounds, 30 pounds, something like that. So just be conscious of that. If you need to bundle them individually, you can do that too. Just watch out for getting dings. So on the outside here is a case that's very thin brass or brass coating, and then there's this hook on top. These hooks can break if they get hit. These cases can obviously get dinged if they get dropped or hit, so just watch out for those things. Also, whenever you handle the brass components, it's a good idea to wear gloves or use a towel, microfiber cloth, something like that, just to make sure you don't get fingerprints on it. So pack up these weights. Same thing, you should have 2 or 3 weights, something like that. And same thing for all of those. And now that's going to keep our pulleys stabilized. I skipped a step on that one because I know it's not going to be a problem. But basically, if once you get that, then anything you can do to kind of get these pulleys where they're not rattling around, you wrap it up with a piece of paper towel or a towel, something like that, and then tape that towel. And avoid getting tape on the brass components because that can leave a residue and it's just kind of a mess. So wrap it up. You can use a string or a zip tie or a tie wrap to keep them so that they're not moving. And then the next thing is we want to take the pendulum out. And of course, as always, make sure when you take this pendulum out that you don't mess up the thing that the pendulum attaches to. In the back of the clock is a rod that hangs down that has the mating puzzle piece for this pendulum hook. And if that rod gets bumped or jostled out of place, then your clock's not going to run when you hook the pendulum back on, or you can damage things when you hook it back on. So make sure that that leader rod back there, the rod dangling down, is hooked on to the suspension spring. It doesn't look like anything's jostled or out of place. And then you'll want to keep that secured either with a piece of string or a zip tie, tie wrap, bread tie, piece of tape, something like that, just to make sure that rod's not bouncing around or hopping off. Then with our pendulum, these are very delicate and very easy to damage. You can get dents in this bob. You can bend anything. You can bend this threaded rod at the bottom off and get bent. Somebody will drop them, or just get twisted or something. That's something we want to avoid. The other thing is these almost always get bent when moving a clock if they're not packed correctly. And you can fix it, but sometimes you can still see it and it just kind of looks bad. So we want to avoid that. A couple ways you can do that. The best way to do that is if you have a gun case, you can put this inside that case, and that'll keep everything nice and still and stiff. If you don't have that, you can just cut a board, 1x4, about the length of the pendulum, a little bit longer, and then take this board, wrap it once in your moving blanket, and then lay this on top of that moving blanket, and then wrap it again and just bundle the whole thing up. I avoid having the board up against the pendulum because I don't want it to scratch or anything like that. So I'd rather have the pendulum touching and moving like it. So wrap this once and then wrap the whole thing into a bundle. Then, one of the most delicate things when moving a grandfather clock is what's called the chime rods. That's these rods back here that chime. And that's where you get your melodies and the strike sounds and things like that. Now, some clocks don't have these. Almost all grandfather clocks do have some type of chime mechanism. Now, you might see a bunch of big tubes in the back. If that's the case, call a professional. Those are a little bit more complicated. You have to take the clock apart and get those tubes out. But for your standard grandfather clock, you just got these chime rods, about an 1/8 inch diameter or so, maybe a little less. And they stick down about right here. And what happens is those rods are very thin, especially at the top where they mount. They're about 1/16 of an inch where they mount. And so as that rod bounces around, you hit a bump, and then they start, kind of getting sympathetic vibrations and amplification of vibration and stuff, and then they eventually can snap off because you got this long rod with a tiny little attachment point. So we want to keep those stable, and you can do that a couple different ways. If you have a piece of like a foam pool noodle or something like that, you can cut off a section about 4 inches and poke some holes in it and do that. One of the fastest, easiest things you can do is just get a piece of cardboard and stab some slits in it, or poke some holes in it, and then you just slide that up onto these rods so that those rods are held separated from each other and held firm with respect to the back of the case. So in this case, I've got the cardboard kind of up against the back of the case. That way it's all held tight. And I'll usually do 2 of those, one at the bottom and one at the top or the middle to hold everything nice and still. Then we want to package and bundle this case. Now at this point, once we've got these pulleys stabilized, we've got the suspension rod held in place, the leader rod held in place, that rod that hangs down that the pendulum attaches to, and we've got our chime rods secured, which these are not secured very well for sake of the video. Now it's just a glass cabinet is all it is. You can move it like it's just any china cabinet or something like that. Obviously be cautious of glass, be cautious of wood, but there's nothing particular at this point. So now, if your moving company is willing to pack things, they could pack this up like it's just a glass cabinet. Or if you want to pack it, what I like to do is I like to throw a blanket or 2 inside here just to make sure that door is not bouncing around too much. Be careful that you're not hitting the rods in that process though. And then close your door and lock it. Now, at this point, make sure that this key goes with your weights or with your pendulum or somewhere else, not down inside the clock, because the clock is locked. And once the clock is locked, then you have no key to open the clock, and you have to watch my other video on how to do that. But take this key, put it in a safe place, don't lose it. You can buy new ones, but that can be a complicated process. So just let me belabor that point. We got the key, and now bundle this up. What I tend to do is I'll throw 1 blanket over the top of it, and then I'll wrap about 2 blankets around it, and then you get a nice cushion, and I'll tape it all up, and of course mark it as fragile to make sure that nobody damages it. That's the big idea. I hope that helps, and I'll see you next time.